The Canadians didn't have a name for it then, but they knew to look for it. One house that stood taller than the others on Juno Beach. It's there in the footage of the D-Day landings. The Germans had used it to shoot at the Canadians, but the Queen's own rifles pushed through, took and held the battered building. The first in France to be liberated on D-Day. A beacon then, and 80 years later, the Canadians still come.
Bonjour. Vous êtes Canadien? Oui.
It is now Nicole Hoffer's house, has been in her husband's family since before the war, and it tells her stories all the time.
As soon as the Canadians landed, the Germans went to hide in the basement and came out into the garden behind the house. And when the Canadians entered the house, they threw grenades by the door that goes to the basement, and they took the Germans prisoner in the backyard. And here it is. The Germans were taken prisoner here.
Some shrapnel marks, a bit of graffiti, she's left it all.
There's some writing here.
But truthfully, she knew nothing of what really happened here until a few decades ago, when aging Canadian men first started quietly staring at the house.
I kept seeing all these people taking pictures of the house. It was me who went up to them and asked why. Why were they taking pictures of the house? It was some veterans, and they started telling me what had happened here, because I didn't know anything about this place. They told me we landed here on June 6, 1944, and we liberated this house. Those were the first words they said. They told the story like it was a film replaying in their minds. And a lot of their families said, "We've never heard about that."
She and her late husband, Hervé, made the decision to open the doors to any Canadian who came by. Their house was clearly Canada House. And just look at it. All the treasures in here brought to her by veterans and their families. Each one a modest piece of D-Day history.
This crucifix was given to us by the daughter of a veteran. This soldier was from the Chaudière regiment who passed through the house. And after Bernieres, he went to another village, and he found this crucifix in the rubble of a house.
Then he put the crucifix in his pocket, and that happened to be precisely the place he would later be hit by shrapnel.
The Christ had lost an arm, but it saved his life. He brought it back to Canada and hung it in his house. And before he died, he made his daughter promise to bring the crucifix here, to Canada House.
There's nothing official behind this effort to remember and respect now. Just a woman who will not stop. The guest book filled with the shaky pen of old soldiers. Their regiments, their memories. Every few pages, a curious story.
We arrived on D-Day, 7:26 a.m.
There's Ernie Kels's entry. When he visited in 2009, he wrote, "Sorry for throwing a grenade in your cellar." Nicole remembers the day he showed up on the boardwalk, just looking at the house.
One day, there was a veteran at the fence, and it was Hervé, my husband, who greeted him and said, "Do you want to come in?" But he didn't want to. Hervé insisted, and at one point he said, "Okay, I would like to come in, but I'm not paying for the damage I caused 50 years ago," because he was one of the Canadian soldiers who threw the grenades into the house.
Nicole has now been meeting veterans for decades. This is the early 2000s. And she says she stays in touch, will do so for as long as they want. And all seem to be learning all the time. The people who live in Bernieres-sur-Mer tell the story that when Canadian veterans have returned to this spot on Juno Beach, the place where they landed on June 6, 1944, often they will ask the question, what happened to the wall? Where's the huge wall that protected them from the German fire that was coming from that house that the Canadians ultimately liberated? Well, it turns out the wall hasn't been destroyed. It's not gone. It's just that the beach has reclaimed it. And if you dig even a little, it's all still there. So the sands have shifted but the beach still holds the evidence of D-Day all these years later. The sand and the sea still hold the stories of what happened right here 80 years ago. And even now, when the tide is high, the sea brings them back. Bits of uniforms, old weapons, the small basics of life in a place that saw so much death. Back inside, Nicole Hoffer's kitchen jars are often full of the found, including what the locals used to call red spaghetti. Really, this is explosive cordite that once packed the shells on D-Day. And it still burns. And the house, it seems, still holds secrets. It was only a few years ago, she says, she ventured into the attic where she found the Nazi armband and ammunition boxes the German units had left behind. A family home that is Canada's too, and a woman who had no idea the place this would hold in her life.
I've been criticized by members of my family. How could you open your doors to strangers? But I say these strangers have brought you your freedom. To give 15 minutes or half an hour of my life after everything they suffered, we can do that. It's very little in a life compared to what they've done.
Nicole Hoffer will be standing by on the 80th anniversary, waiting for the Canadiens.